Good morning, and welcome to San Francisco Zen Center, Beginner's Mind Temple. So Vietnamese Zen teacher Thich Nhat Hanh was asked, "Aren't you worried about the state of the world? Aren't you worried about..." Can you hear me okay? No? Is that better? How is the sound? Okay?
That's good.
Yeah, thank you. So many things to worry about, right? Aren't you worried about the state of the world? And at this particular time, he takes a deep breath and he says, "What is most important is not to allow the anxiety you feel about what happens in the world to fill your heart. What is most important is not to allow the anxiety you feel about what happens in the world to fill your heart. There is tremendous suffering in the world, but it need not paralyze us. If we don't know how to breathe, smile, and live every moment of our lives deeply, we will never help anyone. If we don't know how to breathe, smile, and live every moment of our lives deeply, we will never help anyone." So I took this as I've been kind of mulling on these words and seeing that perhaps either very intently or more secretively, I think he's providing some instructions here, right? The instructions about what about how can we live in this world? And he's suggesting, I think, these three practices: breathing, smiling, and living every moment of our lives. And again, in some way, this is, I think, a useful, practical way to talk about, what to do about our world and what Zen practice is, what it looks like. I was reflecting on. I know this was a few years ago. I was hired to do a mindfulness training for a group of. I think these were a sales team that worked for a big medical company in San Francisco, and I just had I think a half day to do a mindfulness training for this group of about 60 people, and as I got there, there was a lot of excitement and talking about. They had all gone to a magic show the night before in San Francisco, very excited about it. And as I was about to come on to be with this group, I was thinking, how am I going to compete with a magic show? I'm going to talk about mindfulness. And then just as I came on and stood in front of the room, I thought to myself, and I said, "I hear you all went to this magic show last night. Well, I'm a magician too. And mindfulness is a kind of magic." And I then quoted Thich Nhat Hanh as saying, "The real miracle is not to walk on water. The real miracle is to walk right here on earth." And I had each of them do I think from there, one of the ways that I like to talk about mindfulness practice is have people look at their hands. You might try it right now. Maybe just look at your hand. But really, I mean, where did this come from? Where did this hand, we call it a hand, but that limits it, doesn't it, so much? And it's amazing, right? It's amazing. Okay, you can look at it the rest of the day if you want, but for now, this is an example, I think, of the first practice that Thich Nhat Hanh is suggesting is to breathe. And I think it's the practice of seeing, just being present for the magic of our existence, of the magic of our hand, of our life, the magic of our breath, And Thich Nhat Hanh talks about 3 practices, which I think of as breath practices. And he calls these practices the three doors of liberation: emptiness, signlessness, and aimlessness. And emptiness, so with each breath realizing that we're not separate, And empty of separateness is one of many ways to describe this practice of breathing into emptiness, breathing into empty of separateness. And signlessness is a really interesting, I think, practice of not being caught by signs, not being caught by, as soon as we see someone, right, we label them as, good, bad, or neutral, and we do this all the time. We almost can't help it. And this practice of signlessness is to, with each breath, I think, not being caught by our own ways that we limit ourselves, like not seeing our hand, not seeing other people, right? So it's a subtle but not so subtle shift in this practice of breath, practice of breathe, smile, and live. And aimlessness, right? These 3 doors of liberation, right? Emptiness, signlessness, and aimlessness. I'll use this example. My golf partner Corinne is here today. I grew up on golf courses, and then I started practicing Zen, and many years went by, and I stopped playing golf. But I've started recently, and when people hear that about Zen guy playing golf must have this spiritual attitude. No, I want to really play good. I really want to be good. I want to score well. I want to swing well, and I want to do it. I aspire to do it with aimlessness, with a sense of stress-free, complete enjoyment. And I'm not really there yet on either way. I'm not that good, and I'm not that aimless. But I think it's a really, really useful, important practice in, whatever you're doing, whether you as a parent, as a teacher, as a doctor, a lawyer, whatever your work is, this aspiration to excel, and at the same time, this aspiration to let it go and not be attached by outcomes. And again, I think this is partly, again, this first practice of aren't we worried about the state of the world? Breathing into seeing our connection, letting go of our judgments and comparisons that we're making, and this practice of aimlessness along with we all want this aspiration to solve problems, this aspiration that we have deeply to make the world a better place, a safer place, a fairer place. And at the same time, it's I think, a practice of seeing what actually is, seeing what is. And I think Thich Nhat Hanh here is not suggesting ignoring, right? He says, there is tremendous suffering in the world. There is tremendous suffering in the world. So it's not, and there's tremendous suffering in our own individual worlds. We all experience, birth, life, and death. We all experience uncertainty. We all know that we will all die. We will lose everything and everyone. How do we allow ourselves to feel that, not suppress it, not push it away? There's tremendous suffering in the world, but it need not paralyze us. We must know how to breathe, smile, and live in every moment of our lives. So the second practice of smiling, the practice of smiling, I think of that as reframing, seeing, reframing or seeing from different perspectives, perspective taking, right? The perspective, seeing the world through a smile as opposed to seeing the world through a frown. And that we almost always have some choice about how we're seeing the world. And here he's suggesting smiling. Can we smile even at the difficulty, the craziness of our world? Can we find a way to smile at it without ignoring the pain, without ignoring the suffering of it? So perspective taking. I thought of a story about smiles and perspective taking. Is many years ago, I used to run I started a greeting card and calendar company. Actually, it was beautiful walking around this building this morning, looking at all of the Mayumi Oda paintings. If you haven't really looked at them, there's a couple in the dining room, right? Mayumi Oda used to practice here at Zen Center at Green Gulch. And many years ago, I had this kind of crazy idea of starting a company to make things out of recycled paper. And I just mentioned it to Mayumi one day, and within a couple days, she was sitting at my my kitchen table with paintings that she had made to be turned into wrapping paper made from recycled paper. And that was the launch of a company that I started called Brush Dance. And we ended up making many greeting cards and calendars. And I was kind of writing about that I have made and produced in my lifetime millions of greeting cards, but in truth, I've sent very few. I've never been much of a greeting card sender. But this story about breathing and smiling and seeing the world differently, I was driving and this was at a time when my son Jason was probably 16 or 17 years old, and he said to me, "Dad, how's that calendar doing? That one you produced called Golf in the Kingdom, right? I licensed from Michael Murphy, who wrote a famous book called Golf in the Kingdom." And he said, "How's that calendar doing?" And I said, it's actually not doing that well. And my 16-year-old son, looks at me and says, "I could have told you that." He says, "I could come up with a better idea for a calendar than any idea you've ever come up with in five minutes." And So my son was always, of course that made me smile, and I said, it's really easy to criticize, but it's hard to come up with really good ideas for things. And I said, okay, you've got 5 minutes to come up with a better idea. And I looked at my watch and I said, go. And I could see him sitting there scrunching his face. And within a couple of minutes, he looks at me and he says, I've got it. All right, what's your great idea for a calendar? For a calendar idea and he said, why don't you produce a calendar of children's smiles? I said, that's a great idea. It's true, that's better than any idea I've ever, and shortly after that, I was approached by a photographer who was traveling around the world photographing children's smiles. And we did produce such a calendar, and it did quite well in the world. So there's something about smiles, right? And seeing it as a practice, and also, just like this practice of seeing our hand, noticing how much smiling there actually is out in the world when we are aware of it. So I think it goes this practice of smiling. And again, I think here he's suggesting generally the ability to see from a variety of perspectives, right? So often we get caught in our own perspective of how we see the world, how we see ourselves, how we see other people. I think this, in some way, this is the work. The work is of noticing our own perspective, noticing the lens that we see the world through, and realizing it's one lens. Realizing that everyone sees the world through a different lens, right? So this is a practice of perspective taking, is what I think what he's getting at here as what he's calling smiling. And the third practice is to live, right? So he's saying, right, there's tremendous suffering in the world, but it need not paralyze us. If we don't know how to breathe, smile, and live every moment of our lives, we will never help anyone. So this third practice, again, he's using the word live. I think it's a practice of how do we integrate breathing, smiling, or perspective taking? How do we actually live it? How do we live it? And I'm often coming back to one of my, it's fun, I brought with me this copy of Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind, which is kind of an amazing book. This is a pretty well-used copy. And there's one particular talk that I find myself coming back to again and again, called Nirvana, the Waterfall, in which Suzuki Roshi is seeing Yosemite Falls for the first time. And he's looking at the droplets of water falling off the falls. And he says, right, before we were born, we had no feeling. We were one with the universe. After we're separated by birth from this oneness, we have feeling. You have difficulty because you have feeling. You attach to the feeling you have without knowing just how this kind of feeling is created. When you do not realize that you are one with the universe, you have fear. Our life and death are the same thing. When you realize this fact, we have no fear of death anymore and no actual difficulty in this life. You will find the true meaning in life. You will discover how meaningless your old interpretation of life was and how much useless effort you had been making. Your everyday life will be renewed without being attached to an old, erroneous interpretation of life. So I kind of took his words from this chapter and put them in an order that I felt was something that I could study and live by. And again, here I think he's combining breathing, smiling, and living, right? Right? Breathing, this, again, he's talking about no separation. Here he's talking about noticing our, I love his, you will discover how meaningless your old interpretation of life was. So again, he's talking about noticing what lens we're looking through the world through. What lens are we looking through the world through? Can we look at the world through the lens of wonder? Being a sense of wonder, not only when we look at our own hand, but can we live that way? And at the end of this particular talk, he says, it's one thing to have a kind of a intellectual understanding of no separation, of living with a sense of wonder, but can we live it? Can we actually live it in our day-to-day lives? I want to share a poem by William Stafford called Why I Am Happy. Now has come an easy time. I let it roll. There's a lake somewhere so blue and far, nobody owns it. A wind comes by, and a willow listens gracefully. I hear all this every summer. I laugh and cry for every turn of the world. Its terribly cold, innocent spin. That lake stays blue and free. It goes on, and I know where it is. Now has come an easy time. I let it roll. There is a lake somewhere so blue and far, nobody owns it. A wind comes by and a willow listens gracefully. I hear all this every summer. I laugh and cry for every turn of the world. Its terribly cold, innocent spin. That lake stays blue and free, and it goes on, and I know where it is. Yeah, so do you know where that lake is? Do you think about this question, how to be of service in the world? Aren't you a little worried about the state of the world? What is most important is to not allow the anxiety you feel about what happens in the world to fill your heart. There's tremendous suffering in the world, but it need not paralyze us. If we don't know how to breathe, smile, and live every moment of our lives deeply, we will never help anyone. Well, I think come join me in the dining room if you'd like to talk about these things. I hear that's the current form. But maybe just take a moment to feel your own breath. And maybe take a moment just to look around this room and see who's here. I sometimes, I'm fond of the word a conspiracy, right? I like to think of us as a conspiracy, right? Conspire, to breathe together, to breathe together. I think with the, with the mutual intention to breathe, to smile, and to bring our real heartfelt sincerity into this world that needs us. And I really appreciate William Stafford's words in this poem of right. I laugh and cry for every turn of the world, its terribly cold and innocent spin. That lake stays blue and free, it goes on, and I know where it is. I know where it is. So, do you know where where is your lake? Where is your lake? Where is your place that you can come back to find your own ability to breathe and smile and live more deeply? Thank you very much.